Welcome to The Rehab on the Mental Health News Radio Network. I am Dr. Mark Leeds, and I will be your host. Join me in exploring the world of addiction treatment. How can we improve the ways that we help individuals to overcome addiction? The goal of treatment is to save lives and help people to get back on track to a path towards success and happiness in life. Anissa Hudak, welcome to the Rehab Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me here today. Thanks.
You're a Reiki master. Can we talk about Reiki a little bit? Tell me how it works.
Sure. Reiki is a Japanese healing touch therapy. You can touch people or you don't have to. You can just hover. You're working in the bioenergetic field of the body. Let's say if you were able to take your hands and start pulling them closer together, and you're going to get to a point where you feel the other hand, but you're not touching yet. It's in that energetic field that you are working in. You can feel your fingers and your hand, but you're not touching it yet. With Reiki, it's just about creating a sacred space for that person to do whatever kind of healing they need to do. And it's about their higher self, their subconscious. So it's not like I'm going to take energy from your feet and move it up to your head or anything. I'm really not in control of that. It is about just providing the sacred, safe space for you and your higher self to do whatever self-healing needs to happen. Now, you could say, you could get on the table and say, oh, my knee really hurts. I could spend a lot of time hovering around your knee and working on that. But your higher self is going to take that energy and put it towards anything that it really needs, it sees fit to heal. And so it could be something else, and you could get up and say, gosh, my knee still hurts. That could very well be. But your higher self took that energy and put it towards something else that really felt like it needed to heal more. So I'm not really in control of it. I just create the sacred space. Your higher self takes it from there. Now, that being said, usually people kind of go into a place where they're not quite asleep and they're not quite awake. And that's really where that self-healing happens. I've had people talk the entire time. I've had people sleep the entire time. Either way, you're getting whatever it is your higher self needed during that time. I've had people cry on my table, scream, laugh, talk, you name it. Again, it's whatever they needed to do. Most people say they feel warmth. Some people say they feel cold, and it's really whatever their body needs in that moment. The energy provides for them. But generally, most people say my hands are very warm, and that's the Reiki flowing.
Just the idea of having a therapy that you can provide that's hands-on but no touching involved. I know there a lot of people don't want to be touched. They're uncomfortable with it. Mm-hmm. Or even there's people with fibromyalgia that are very sensitive to touch and they really can't be touched. That's really good to have something where you can come very close and actually provide or help with a healing energy and not actually have to put your hands on.
For me personally, I feel like my hands-on touch is better. I'm able to kind of sense things a little bit better within the body. But if someone says to me, I'd rather you not touch me, I won't touch them. That's easy. And I can just hover in that area and kind of go from there.
So you still have the option to do it either way. Now, what about centers of energy in people?
So chakras, it's energy bundles, it's nerve bundles. Here in the West, we would call them nerve bundles, and they absolutely exist within the body. We have 7 main chakras in the body, but actually we have over 240. But there's 7 main chakras that we work with. I do work with the chakras. I have a pendulum. I can see if they're blocked, if they're moving the right ways, that kind of thing. Can I help unblock them? Absolutely. I know how to do that. I actually use essential oils to help me with that. In conjunction with the Reiki, I use the essential oils to help unblock the chakras. Also, with using the Reiki, I do apply the Reiki to certain chakras, especially at the feet and at the head, and also in the hands. I really like to make sure that I hit those 3 main areas, those 3 main chakras with Reiki.
There's actually a place right across the street from us. They do sound therapy. They have a whole room dedicated to sound therapy. They have like these bowls that generate different frequencies and tuning forks. And from what they told me about it, it's all related to freeing up blockages of energy in the body.
Yes, I have a friend who does tuning forks, and I have to tell you, it's absolutely amazing. She actually was able to blow out my third eye chakra. It was beautiful. It was amazing. It was just a wonderful experience. The singing bowls, I have a singing bowl, but I have heard of and I've seen the singing bowl therapy where they actually put the singing bowls on your body, and the different tones of the bowls actually create a different vibration for each chakra, and it helps to clear out the chakras and energy. I haven't had it done. I've seen it. I think it's pretty cool. So if you ever get the chance to really take part in that, I would do that.
I found it interesting because I just love everything to do with sound. I love electronic music and recording and playing with sound. And another thing, and this was a topic of conversation yesterday, we were talking about binaural beats and the how you can use these sound programs where you put on headphones and you have different tones in each ear, and your brain perceives a beat frequency between those two tones. And we're actually talking about the theta range of brain waves. I think it's between like 4 and 7 hertz. And in that range, it can bring you into that half awake, half sleep state where you kind of, for me, I start to hear like really vivid voices and I feel like it stimulates creativity, and it's really kind of a great state to be in, maybe right before you fall asleep, or just, if you're meditating or relaxing.
It's a great place to do your self-healing. That's kind of that area where you can do that self-healing.
As far as yoga, now in our previous conversation, we talked about the psoas muscle, which, I found really interesting.
In addition to being a Reiki master, I'm also a yoga therapist, and I work with those specifically who have problems with PTSD, TBIs, traumatic brain injuries, and other trauma-related issues. So anxiety, depression, insomnia, you get the gist, all of that kind of stuff. I work primarily with the psoas. Now, that being said, you're going to get a full body workout in one of my classes. And the reason for that is because we have what we call the psoas trail. Now, the psoas, in my humble opinion, it is the most important muscle of the body. And that's because it is, have you ever been ill or been in an accident and your body has curled itself up into the fetal position? If you have, that is the psoas muscle. And it protects all of your internal organs here in the front. And so without that muscle, you would have been left totally exposed, and possibly, as far as cavemen were concerned, you could have died, right? So that psoas muscle is absolutely paramount. Now, the other thing that psoas muscle does is it's the emotional warehouse of the body. And so all of your happiness, your joy, your frustration, your anger, your grief, everything is contained and held in this muscle. You might also know this muscle as its other name, the hip flexor. Now, the hip flexor is the deepest muscle of the body, so it's really hard to kind of get to, which is why we work the trail. And the trail starts behind the knee, and it goes into the inner thighs. From there, it's the actual hip flexor, the psoas. From there, it juts into the back, and it goes all the way up the spine to where the spine meets the skull. And this is why you're going to get a full body workout in our yoga class, because we have to kind of warm up the whole trail so we can get really deep into that psoas. What we want to do is we want to exhaust the psoas as much as we can. And by doing that, it offers little releases. And so people sometimes say, gosh, my thighs are jiggling and I'm not moving. How come my thighs are like jelly and why am I spasming? That's great. We want that. Sometimes people don't even feel it happening, and that's okay too. There's no rhyme or reason. Those little releases release all kinds of emotional baggage that you don't have to carry. And by doing that, it frees up room so you can then tackle new things that are going to be coming up in your life, because as we know, we lead very stressful lives. And so it kind of gives you more room to be able to hold that stress. And so that, in a nutshell, is our psoas muscle.
You've started this program, Trauma Healing Yoga. You've provided treatment to people with PTSD, and I see that you help to empower women. And I know a lot of women have had trauma. You say in your website, 1 in 4 have had sexually related trauma. Do you provide coaching or counseling or yoga therapy? Women from anywhere in the country could reach out to you and get help or talk to you?
Absolutely, I do. I have a program. It's called the SAS Community, and that is for sexually assaulted and abused survivors. It is all women. I am a 2-time rape survivor, and so I walk the walk every day. I understand. I've done it. I live it. Sometimes I revisit it, just like everybody else. And so I've created a community where women can kind of come together. We know that community is very important when it comes to addiction recovery, any kind of recovery, quite frankly. I mean, look at Weight Watchers, AA and NA, and all of these groups have communities. And I realized that for women like me, we didn't have a community. In fact, it's kind of encouraged not to talk about it. Well, you know what? Quite frankly, I'm not ashamed. I have no reason to be ashamed. I have no reason to be embarrassed. Shouldn't I be allowed to talk about it? If I had cancer, I would be allowed to, right? So I should be allowed to talk amongst my peers and get support. And I'm sure there's another woman out there who's been in my situation, and it would be nice to get her feedback. We need a community. And so that's what I've created. Not only will they get that kind of community, but also 24/7 access to recorded yoga therapy with me. And that's because, at 3:00 in the morning when nobody's really up and you're walking the halls of your house, you could get on your computer and take advantage of that and maybe help yourself go back to sleep or work out whatever it is that's on your mind that's pressing. We don't get to choose when our PTSD flares up and when we need help. And so that way there's always 24/7 access to a class. And there's going to be other things in there, yoga nidra, meditations, all kinds of other healing modalities, because healing is not a one-size-fits-all kind of a thing. And I'm sure you've encountered that with your addiction recovery. Just because it works for someone doesn't mean it works for someone else. People need options. And just because something doesn't work right now doesn't mean it's not going to work for them in 6 months or a year or 18 months, because there'll be a different person then. And they've come through a little bit more of their recovery at that point, and maybe they need to try whatever it is again because it's different for them at that point. So you need to be retesting things, retrying things, and have other things other than meds and talk therapy, because there's more to recovery than that.
In your blog, you've talked about triggers being an important thing, and we had discussed that as far as, someone who's addicted, they may be doing great in recovery, and they stop having the cravings, they feel great, and they're walking down the street, and something they see, maybe they see a street corner, or a smell or a sound, something triggers them. They're triggered back into that state of mind. They start craving again, they start thinking about it again, they maybe feel terrible about themselves. And I know that that's in other kinds of trauma also, PTSD and any kind of life trauma, that you might have something that triggers you back into a negative state again.
I am of the thought process that triggers are actually really good things. Now, they don't feel great when you're going through them. Let's be honest. They're not fun. But they're leaving breadcrumbs for you. They are leaving a trail so you know where to go next with your therapy. And so maybe you need to take that trigger and either go right to a meeting, if that's what you're doing. Maybe you need to go see your talk therapist and say, I've had this trigger. And you need to unpackage it, because it's giving you the path of where to go next with your therapies. They're actually helping you. And if you can turn it around and look at it as, okay, this is helping me, I need to unpackage this next, then you can use it to your advantage.
Going through the different kinds of therapy with yoga and meditation, will that help people to deal better with triggers?
It can very well. I talk with people, when you're going through a trigger, what can you do in that moment to kind of help keep you present? Because, a trigger wants to take you back to that place. And how can we remain present? And that's really the key. For me personally, when I was triggered, I had a trigger back in January, and it was intense. For me, I was able to go to my therapist. I unpackaged it with him, and we actually did EMDR around it. And that was really wonderful for me. It may not work for everyone. With EMDR, different therapists do it differently. And so if you're working with someone and the way they're doing it doesn't seem to work for you, maybe you need to try a different therapist, because they're going to do it a little differently, and that might work for you. That I found out, and I was kind of like, wow, I didn't realize that. So just because you say, oh, I tried that once, it didn't work, try it with somebody else, because everybody does it a little differently. But for me, that worked. Of course, meditation, yoga nidra, and I use the 5 senses to help keep people present.
Do you also do one-on-one coaching with people? If someone wants to just talk to you and work with you directly, even if they're not in your area, can someone reach out to you and have a session just one-on-one?
Absolutely.
Anissa Hudak, thank you for joining me today on the Rehab Podcast.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us today on The Rehab on the Mental Health News Radio Network. I hope that you have found this show to be interesting and useful. If so, please subscribe to the Rehab podcast and share on social media. I appreciate your taking the time to listen to The Rehab.